Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Birthing on Country Centre of Research Excellence this afternoon and want to acknowledge the sovereign lands that we all reside on. I'm currently on the traditional lands of the Yarra people here in Ribibi or Broome, and acknowledge the sovereign lands of all the lands, the seaways that we all reside on, and want to say a special acknowledgement to our elders past, present and emerging, who continue to work hard for our communities, who have passed down important knowledge regarding land care, family care, spiritual and cultural care. So I want to acknowledge that. This afternoon, we've got a really important speaker. Charles Darwin University has, as an institution, is supported the yes vote, yes to the voice to the Constitution. And this afternoon we have got Dr. Josie Douglas, who is a Wardaman woman who lives currently in Bartua on Central Arrernte country for many years. She has extensive experience in policy and governance and has held executive management positions in Central Australian Aboriginal Congress and the Central Land Council. She is currently an executive manager in policy and governance at CLC. Josie has extensive experience and relationships with attending the Constitutional Convention in 2007 at Uluru, and has been a long-standing advocate for the Uluru Statement from the Heart, but also ensuring that the issues for people living in very remote Central Australia, Barkly region, are put on the table. I also have to declare that Josie is my younger sister, so I'm sitting here as a very excited big sister. And as per all our seminars, if you have queries or anything like that, please put them in the chat box, and Dr. Douglas will address them at the end of her talk. So I invite you to sit back and to become more informed and more aware of why the voice to Parliament is important. Over to you, Josie.
Thank you, Professor Rowe. I would also like to acknowledge the lands that I'm meeting on, the Arrernte land, and also Larrakia land in Darwin, where CDU, the head of, is based, and to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining the seminar today, as well as friends, colleagues and allies joining us today. As the debate surrounding the referendum to establish a voice to Parliament intensifies, we must not lose sight of its primary goal to make a practical, positive difference to the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and make Australia a fairer, more inclusive nation. The Central Land Council has been part of the journey for the Uluru Statement from the Heart since the very beginning. We know that there are better outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people when our solutions and voices are included in policy design and legislation. Excuse me. The CLC has passed numerous resolutions supporting the Uluru Statement and the voice to Parliament. And on screen, you can see a timeline. Constitutional recognition and a national Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice are not new ideas. The timeline you see represents CLC's history with constitutional recognition and the need for a national Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. The 1988 Wardaman Statement came out of a joint meeting of the CLC and NLC 35 years ago, and it called for treaty and recognition and the need for a national representative body. And of course, we have a long history before 1988 of Aboriginal groups and Torres Strait Islander groups across Australia calling for national representation and a national body. I'll just move on to my next slide. In June this year, land councils again met at Barunga and strongly endorsed the voice to Parliament, issuing the Barunga Voice Declaration, which was presented to the Prime Minister then later on in Canberra. And the need for constitutional recognition started to be talked about more across the country after the Referendum Council was set up in 2015 by the Coalition Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull and the leader of the Labor opposition, Bill Shorten. We've had about 6 Prime Ministers now attending to this very important concept of constitutional recognition. The Referendum Council recommended consultations with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia to hear about how to best recognise Indigenous people in Australia's constitution. This led to 13 regional dialogues that brought together thousands of Indigenous people from across Australia. And CLC hosted the regional dialogue at Ross River that was attended by 100 people. I'll just move to the next one. From these dialogues, 250 people were elected to take the ideas from those meetings forward to the Uluru Constitutional Convention. And from the Uluru Convention, we have the Uluru Statement that came about in May 2017. And the Uluru Statement, as many of you know, promotes voice, truth and treaty. And these 3 things were considered to be the most important from the consultations leading up to the convention and by the 250 people who attended the convention. Only 7 people at the convention did not agree with those priorities and they walked out, and that was their right to do so. So we've been stuck in a downward spiral for many years. Everybody wants it to stop. And this cycle of failure is wasteful and inefficient, and it's costing the lives and futures of our people. However, the great benefit of the voice proposal is that if successful, there will always be a voice at a national level, which has not been the case up until now. Our voices are present, but they're not permanent and have no constitutional authority. This is the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So history tells us that we've had bodies created and then abolished. So we've had those national voices that have been created by the federal government and then all have been defunded or abolished by the federal government over the years. The permanence of a constitutionally protected voice is critical. The permanence is important as it will shift the power balance between governments and Aboriginal people, where there no longer needs to be the concern that the voice will be disbanded if the government doesn't like the advice it is getting. And Aboriginal people will be able to speak more freely without this covert threat hanging over them. Sorry. The referendum, if successful, will change that, and it will mean that the federal government and ultimately state and territory governments genuinely listening and particularly acting on the advice of First Nations people through their own community-controlled organisations and being a strong part of the new voice. It could mean a new era. Just going to stop sharing. Sorry. So the voice is an important opportunity to support local solutions and local success. It provides an opportunity, and if constituted and funded properly, it will improve national policy development and implementation. This includes securing First Nations-led and nationally consistent approaches to serious gaps, such as returning maternity services to First Nations communities and community control for improved health and wellbeing. We know that with maternity services, we have a policy framework and an evidence base, but no funding attached to implement this important continuity of care that's needed and to operationalise the Birthing on Country framework, a service that is much needed in very remote contexts in our urban and regional centres. And I have had personal experience of negotiating a midwifery group practice in Alice Springs for Congress Uluru. Congress has spent over a decade trying to secure such an arrangement with Alice Springs Hospital. And of course, during that time frame, we've had poor outcomes for pregnant women and babies. However, in 2023, this is set to become a reality. It has taken patience and perseverance and advocacy from Congress, who never gave up on the need for remote Aboriginal women to have the best maternity care and a culturally appropriate service that they can attend. And I also want to acknowledge the work of CDU and the Molly Centre in having a role in supporting this achievement. The voice can assist with closing the gap. It can assist with improved maternity services, but it cannot do it on its own. We should not forget that we have an extensive community control sector already doing the hard work for improving health and wellbeing outcomes. And they play a very important role in going forward in terms of the work of the voice. So what is being proposed? The referendum on a voice to Parliament is a vote yes or no to insert a new section into the Constitution, which would be located in a new chapter, Chapter 9, and it would be called Recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Peoples at the end of existing chapters of the Constitution. And the section to be titled Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice would contain four key components. And the purpose of these components are to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia, to provide for the establishment of a new constitutional entity called the Voice, to set out the core representation making function of the voice, and to confer upon the Parliament legislative power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the voice, including its composition, functions, powers and procedures. Furthermore, in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia, this is how it's written: there shall be a body to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice may make representations to the Parliament and the Executive Government of the Commonwealth on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and the Parliament shall, subject to the Constitution, have power to make laws with respect to matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice, including its composition, functions, powers and procedures. I'm no legal expert, but what we know is that the proposal makes an appropriate distinction between the Constitution and legislation, and tailors things to the respective strengths of the voters and the Parliament as key constitutional actors. The Australian people will be asked to determine the key question of principle, whether there should be constitutional recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples through an enduring representative body that empowers them to have a say on the laws and policies affecting their daily lives. If the answer is yes, then the Parliament will move to legislate the details within the constitutional parameters endorsed by the voters, the Australian public. It would potentially mislead voters and impair the constitutional function of the referendum to present a detailed model of the voice prior to the question of principle being resolved. That's a very important matter. Voters may wrongly think that they are voting on those details of that model and not the constitutional provision, which is pitched at a much higher level of principle and generality. One of the key objectives of the constitutional amendment is to provide flexibility for the model to evolve as it adapts to changing needs and circumstances. What is being proposed follows sound practice. First, defining the basic outlines of an institution in the Constitution, and then determining the details later in legislation. The Australian colonies did this in referendums held between 1898 and 1900, when Section 71 of the Constitution enshrined the High Court as a key feature of the Australian system of government. The court came fully to life 2 years later, once the detail of the institution was spelt out in the Judiciary Act of 1903. So it is not a trick. It is not an attempt to hide anything. In fact, it avoids giving a misleading impression before people vote on the question of principle. It is a sensible recognition that legislation should come after confirmation in the Constitution that the people of Australia support a voice. And it respects the strengths of voters as the right people to answer the question of principle, and the Parliament as the right people to work out the details. So the history of bureaucrats and politicians making decisions for our people and the failures of those decisions still live with us right now. And it is well overdue for change, and a voice to Parliament is a starting point for that change. Here in the Northern Territory, we're not closing the gap. We're going backwards on 8 out of the 17 targets. That's because governments keep ignoring our grassroots solutions. Right now, we are divided by unequal life outcomes and unequal start to life, which can be improved, for starters, with better maternity care for our communities. This is the divide that we want to close through the voice. It is not about creating division, but it is actually about getting rid of that divide. And a vote yes will bring us closer together as a nation. Nothing else will. Win or lose the lives of the no campaigners, those voices on the far right and ultra left won't be impacted much. Those who vote yes will feel we have changed the nation, bringing the country together, and will help in using the resources better as a consequence of better policy. The opponents of the voice stand to lose the least. Both those on the far right who feel threatened by our voices would prefer to go on ignoring our voices, and those on the ultra left would rather protest than do the hard policy work required. The right fears that the voice would threaten equal treatment, while some on the left adopt a definition of sovereignty that is unanchored from the dreaming, the Jukpa. Instead, the voice Australians will be asked to vote on later this year, and it could be in October sometimes, we're anticipating, poses a simple but monumental choice: whether or not the first people of this country can have input and help shape policies and laws being made about us. Advice that would ultimately see better policy and therefore improvements in health and maternity care, education, housing, employment, child welfare, youth justice, to name a few. What is outrageous, I would say, is not to amplify, not to hear our voices, especially in regional and remote Australia, where I and many others live. Better outcomes for people out bush means better outcomes for all. And the voice looks to the future. Right now, we are only making limited progress, and the gap is closing too slowly. It has taken literally decades of advocacy, hard work and persuasion by our communities and organisations to get to where we are today. But we cannot continue like this. The system is broken and it needs fixing. And unless you are in the system, unless you're in policy or you're dealing with government, dealing with the system regularly, it is hard to put your finger on the problem. Decisions are made in Canberra and in our capital cities, far away from our lives and our solutions. There's plenty of advice around Parliament House in Canberra. It's just that it's advice from career bureaucrats, ministerial and policy advisors and chiefs of staff, many of whom are well-intentioned, but most of whom have no idea about us or the solutions that will work on the ground. And the technocrats, they chop and change and move on. And this is the cycle that contributes to poor policy design and outcomes. In summary, I know that most fair-minded Australians out there would understand that advice from a committee of respected community representatives who have solutions to the challenges that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people face is far better and will have greater impact on the ground than the advice being provided by well-meaning public servants and ministerial advisors, many with very limited practical experience of Indigenous issues or remote community life. Then we have the churn of the political cycle. Every 3 years, new advisors, new ideas, replacing the steady, the carefully considered advice from Aboriginal communities and leaders and representative organisations. It's like snakes and ladders, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. We want steady and sure steps going into the future, and this is what the voice can deliver. The voice will give us a constitutional right to be heard. We agree with the No campaign on this. It will be permanent, and it is positive that it's permanent. It will sweep away business as usual, which has failed us. That's what will save taxpayers millions. We keep spending on failed programs and approaches, but most importantly, it will save lives that are cut short. If you keep doing the same thing, you'll get the same result. And a vote no is a vote for the status quo. There's no such thing as a progressive no. History will not record whether you were a progressive no or a hard conservative no. When we visit our communities and at our council meetings, we're hearing about young people taking their own lives, about high levels of employment due to a lack of jobs in remote communities, about lack of jobs and training for young people, about diseases such as rheumatic heart disease in communities where this has been eradicated in mainstream Australia. And we have rheumatic heart disease due to people living in overcrowded houses. So, yes, people are raising all the problems we could solve if only we're at the table where laws and policies about us are being made in consultation with us. And I'm hearing loud and clear from people out bush. People are saying we want change, we want better lives for our children and our future generations. We want to have a say in our lives, to have a say on what is happening to us. You can give you some little examples of other feedback we're hearing. So in Tennant Creek, for example, a young Aboriginal woman approached CLC staff after we'd given a presentation on the voice. She was fresh out of school and had just started her first job. And before the CLC talk about the voice and referendum, she did not know Australia had a constitution and was shocked that Aboriginal people were not recognised in such an important document. She said she had been reading a lot of misinformation online about the voice and now felt able to see that the information was wrong, and was confident about having conversations with people about the voice. And at that same time, she asked for help to change her enrolment address to make sure that she can vote. We need people to be enrolling and voting. At a small community north of Alice Springs, we had a local Aboriginal health worker attend a CLC voice community information session. And this health worker said that having the voice in the Constitution was really important, and having it protected there would allow it time to develop, grow and get stronger, not get knocked down again with every new government. This is the words of that local health worker, that the voice could develop, grow and get stronger. He said it wouldn't be perfect at the start, but it is opening the door for it to get better and stronger as it grows up. And I quite like the way he expressed that. Another example is we have a senior ranger coordinator at CLC based at Hart's Range, and he remembered being at Barunga in 1988. He said that the voice was building on the work of leaders from before, and supporting the voice is respecting the hard work of the leaders who have passed away now. And he said it's not a new idea, but it's a good idea worth following. It's not surprising that many people out bush are dealing with the lots on. We know people out bush have lots on, sorry. We know that people out bush are dealing with near constant grief and day-to-day survival. We know that the cost of living pressures in the bush are so much worse than down south or on the east coast. We also know that people out bush are understandably sceptical about promises that things will finally change, having had their hopes raised and dashed too many times. Yet still, when we talk to people out bush, and some of those examples I just gave you, there is still enthusiastic support for the voice when they have factual answers to their questions. And so on this note, I would like to finish with a video of CLC council members, and then I'm happy to take questions following the video. So just bear with me while I pull up the video. Okay, just going to share the screen.
What does the voice mean to you?
Recognition,
Opportunity.
country,
Be strong and go forward.
Hope.
everything.
The voice is to say yes, you are Wangayalo. Talk. So our voice might be heard in the parliament by the government for our needs, so that another intervention won't come along. We need to say UA.
UI,
Morandora. UA.
Ngijamar.
Kalamura, Kalamura.
It's a 1 in a million chance of a lifetime for our voice to get into parliament so we can be heard, knowing that the government will really recognize us as First Nations people of this great land of Australia.
For sake of our kids' future.
Open your heart. Say yes for this one. Referendum.
Yes. Palla.
Vote yes.
Vote yes. Vote yes. If we vote yes, it would be a really good idea. Give us a chance for our future. Also, I'm going to vote yes. So you vote too. Yes.
Thank you for that. Are you back to seeing me now?
Yep. Before you take questions, Josie, I'd just like to ask everybody to put their camera on, and if we can give Josie a round of applause virtually, that would be really great. Thank you. Josie's invited people to put questions in the chat box. I haven't got any that I've received so far, but there were a couple of things that you did raise, Josie, which was the people knowing where to get informed information from. What are the best sites that people, if they're not quite sure, they don't need to siphon that information out, what's some of the sort of the top 3 sites people should be going to?
Yes, 23 is the first, in no particular order. So yes, 23, the Uluru Dialogues or the Uluru Statement from the Heart, Pat Anderson, who's known to many of you, and Megan Davis. So the Uluru Dialogues, that's the second. And then the Central Land Council website. We're kicking off a dedicated public resource on our website this week. There's also, if you're interested in the legal aspects of it, you can go to YouTube, and legal expert Professor Anne Toomey has got a number of YouTube videos explaining the legal overview of the voice.
Terrific, Josie. The other question that was asked at GAMA when you were on a panel was this sort of sense of, at the end of the day, it's virtually mainstream Australia that's going to have the voting numbers. Can you tease that out for us? What does that mean when it comes to the numbers and what the voting impact means?
Sure. So many of you good CDU academics know, and students and researchers, we're 3% of the population, so we need the 97% to vote, and to change the constitution you need a double majority. So you need majority of the states to vote yes, and the majority of the Australian population at large to vote yes. Our constitution is one of the hardest in the world to change. So we don't have the voting power. So we absolutely need, we're relying on the Australian public to understand and to receive the correct information about the voice, so that when they cast their vote on voting day, that they are well aware that their vote will make a significant difference to the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And because we are a minority, even though a minority with a unique status in terms of a 65,000 continuous history of Australia, we're not like other minority groups, or we've got a distinct status as the first people of Australia. And so and it should be right, for that status should rightfully be reflected in Australia's constitution. So I think we don't have the numbers. So my challenge to all of you is, if you are going to vote yes, and you have friends and family and colleagues who are undecided, if you could try and convince, 2 or 3 friends and family to understand why the voice to Parliament is so important, you're absolutely helping the cause. We know that with the marriage equality vote, and I think Noel Pearson has made this point, a lot of Australians have members in their family, gay and lesbian members in their family who they know and have a connection with. We're hearing from the polling and from focus groups that have been carried out that a lot of Australians are saying, I don't know any Aboriginal people. I didn't grow up with Aboriginal people. I don't know, and so they're looking, importantly, to the Northern Territory in terms of what Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory are feeling and thinking about the voice. We know from focus groups that Australians are looking to Aboriginal leadership and Aboriginal elders more generally across Australia. So, we could have a referendum, a date announced pretty soon. It could be in October. I think October the 14th has been spoken about. We don't know. The Prime Minister's keeping the date up his sleeve, and so that would be the challenge to all of you, is try and convince those that who are voting no to understand the reasons why. Firstly, to really understand the facts around the voice, because there's so much misinformation out there.
We've got some at the Molly Centre. We have some young women that work for us, and as I look over my colleagues in the Brisbane office, so a young Aboriginal woman living in Brisbane, having heard your talk, thinks actually that's not my world. And I can't relate. What's the connection between someone living in remote bush to someone living in urban space regarding, when there are so many differences in lifestyles and stresses and strains that will make people connect on the wisdom that you've just shared?
Yeah, I think, there are big differences between very remote and urban and metropolitan, but there's also significant commonality as well in terms of policy and legislation being made about, at the Commonwealth level that's impacting Aboriginal Australians and Torres Strait Islander people, no matter where you live. And that can be even in terms of maternity services and appropriate maternity care for mums and bubs. I mean, the principles of that care go across remote and urban. It's about feeling culturally safe, about having access to excellent service provision, about having access to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander support workers and caseworkers, about seeing a midwife, the same midwife, through having that continuity of care. Those principles go beyond whether you're remote or urban. They're principles and quality of care. So that's my response to that.
Jo, I realise that your time is really busy and you've got a whole campaign and you're doing amazing work at CLC. And wrapping it up, so we want to thank you for your time again. As the takeaway message, if we remember something that you shared today, what is the stuff that you're thinking, actually go away and think about this or do that? What would you like us to, what's our takeaway message from this presentation?
Vote yes. Vote yes. I think I'm talking to a pretty, in tune audience here. So vote yes. Try and convince people who are undecided about the merits of the voice, and that's the second thing. And then just to say, look, a vote no is a vote for the status quo. Okay? Things cannot keep going the way that they're going. We're committing future generations to the same grind. So there is no such thing as a progressive no. A no is a no. And history will not, qualify whether you are a progressive no or a conservative no. And of course, the polls are very worrying. And I think that the No campaign are doing a very good job in terms of creating that cloud of complexity, that misinformation that's out there. But fundamentally, we need change to happen. We need it's the permanence of the voice within the Constitution that's going to stop the Commonwealth Government defunding or abolishing bodies that might get up. We want the voice to get up. So please talk to friends and family and colleagues in a safe way, only if you feel, in a safe space to do, because we know people are being harassed, people are being targeted. I know young mums who support the voice, but who are, feel a bit scared to put a yes call flute on her front yard because she's worried about, what that might attract to her and her bub being at home during the day on their own. So, it is, a tricky time for a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in terms of the hate that is raining down on us. And I use Pat Anderson's phrase, the hate that is raining down on us. And as an Aboriginal person, even saying that makes me feel emotional. But that's what's happening because of the misinformation. And as somebody said to me, the other day, if the voice is only an advisory body, why is everybody so worried and concerned about what it could do? I think back to native title, in 1992, 93, and the propaganda and the misinformation that was raging across Australia about what native title would do, about people losing their backyards and their hills hoist to, the natives, has proven to be untrue. So that's a long-winded answer, Yvette, to your final question. Vote yes, and a vote no is a vote for the status quo, and, things can't keep going on.
I've just got a message in the text box from Glenda, who says, thank you, Dr. Douglas, for your words. You've given me some words to help me spread the message. So thank you. Thank you again. Again, a round of applause from all of us for your time, your wisdom and your motivation about why the yes vote is important, especially as it relates to mums and bubs. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.